And that was because I had to go up and down, because we'd make mistakes, and it got to the end where everyone, when you made a mistake, someone would go, "Who did that? Oh, fire Connie, we've got to get up and down, fire Debbie, oh." And I was like, these kids are getting a bit of hoo-ha with us. But they were good, yeah.
Good.
Right. Mate, I think I'm here.
Yeah?
I think I'm here.
You've been busy, Billy.
Oh, it's been crazy, I tell you.
I've sent you a list, but you might not have had a chance to look at it
When did you send it?
last night.
No, I wouldn't say
Yeah, I'm just going to forward it to everyone now because I just wanted to wait
Yeah,
till I
forward
had
it again to me.
time.
And I'll check through, because
He's about 1 minute away. He got held up with the puppy, which is running. He's happy for me to circulate this because I didn't want to circulate it before getting his okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to check with you.
Hey. What about the rest of us? Hey. What's she getting paid off for? Oh. Oh, that's right, the organiser, eh? The organiser. Oh, okay. Didn't she go past in the butt? You'll get this, you'll do that, you do this. I know. And you got sick over it. And you got sick over it. The stress. So, the general rule of thumb over this side of the table is we second everything Karen moves, and we vote with okay?
I like that. Thank you, Billy.
We'll get the rates down a little bit.
Yeah.
She won't touch sports though.
Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to our council meeting of Wednesday the 1st of March, 2023. I think, are we in autumn now, officially? Maybe winter, but anyway, welcome everybody. And before we begin our meeting proper, if I could ask Councillor Fitzgerald to open our meeting, please, with karakia.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ngā mihi o te ata kia koutou, kia tātou e te whare. Good morning and welcome to everybody in the chamber. Me karakia tātou is a great honour and privilege to start our council meeting with a karakia blessing. Nō reira, tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tākia. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Right, we have our order of business today. Number one is around apologies. Our apologies this morning are for lateness, Councillor Dennison, and for early departure, and then rejoining us in early afternoon is the Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to move those. If I could have a seconder. Councillor Wood, thank you. Let's wait for that to come up on screen. And we will vote, please.
Yep.
It has passed 15 votes for and none against. Thank you. A little bit remiss of me. I should have done our housekeeping first, so we'll go back to that. And look, the meeting is, and welcome again everybody, the meeting is being recorded as live streamed on our council's YouTube channel. Our health and safety will come onto the screen, and those will be very familiar with this. Our fire and emergency exits are listed, signalled there. Unlike the event of an evacuation, we assemble at the clock tower in the Te Marae Ahine, the square. In terms of, it is a non-smoking facility. If toilets are in the link span as you entered, defibrillator is located at the front of house on the ground floor, and any incidences, please report them to our committee administrators. Okay, we will now get to our second item, and notification of any additional items, and there is one from Councillor Naylor. It's around to adopt option C as a debating style for item 7 around our annual budget. That's under standing order 2.12.1. It's around options for speaking and moving motions and amendments, and multiple times, but do remember that we obviously will be taking these as separate amendments, and then we'll do a catch-all substantive at the end, as we've done in past debates on annual plans and long-term plans. So, Councillor, do you have a seconder for that?
I was hoping you would, Mr Mayor.
We've got a well, yeah. I'll leave it to Councillor Barrett, but I will support it. Yeah. Okay, this is just a simple majority vote, so I don't think it needs any more explanations. So, could we vote, please? And that's passed 13 votes for and 2 against.
Let's go home early.
Don't worry about it today.
Sure it did.
It's counted though.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that one. Okay, we move through to declarations of interest, if there are any. I haven't received any. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, related to item number 8, I served on the panel that heard private plan change Matani residential area. Given that that is packaged with plan change J in the same item, I think I'll just step back from the whole item as a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now move through to public comment, and we have a couple of members of the public that wish to speak, and I'll invite first up Hannah and Danielle from New Zealand Girl Guides. Welcome, and just remember to push your, yeah, that's it, you've got it, and the light will come on, and that means your microphone's on. Because of time, we've got 3 minutes, but you have that time.
Tēnā koutou. Ko Hannah Ramsey, tōku ingoa. I'm the local coordinator for our Girl Guide team that stretches across Palmerston North and Fielding. In this role, I support 15 different units and around 30 volunteers. Panako Hall is a beloved part of our guiding whānau and still used very actively by our local team. On Wednesday and Thursday evenings, there are 3 Girl Guide groups who operate out of Panako Hall. The wider Palmerston North and Manawatu team also hold events at the hall on other weeknights and weekends for activities like camps, outdoor days, and community connection. These extra activities take place every 6 weeks or so. At a local level, it is still very much loved and appreciated part of our history and community. It is the only dedicated space we have in Palmerston North for girl guiding. We have previously shared the hall with other groups and currently do so with a Sunday school. Due to this, we would like to see option 1 go through. We would love the hall to remain in its current place and would be very grateful for the hall buyer to permit us to continue to use the hall in the future. Kia ora.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions of members to? Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Finlay. Sorry, you've been called back. If you want to come back. Councillor Finlay.
I do have a question. We're looking at what we're going to do with this hall. If another organisation takes over ownership of the hall and it clashes with Girl Guiding because you use it the 2 nights, how will that affect you?
So as part of the process for looking at what we're going to do with the hall, we've investigated other avenues or other venues, and if we were to stay in Aupuni, which is where these 3 groups operate, there's very limited resource on the nights and in fact most of the weeknights available at the moment. We would, if the hall operator or if the hall owner were willing, we'd be more than happy to look at potentially moving night or time. But the issue with doing that is we rely entirely on our volunteers and the time that they can give to make the units happen.
It would cause quite a few hassles for you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. It is now. Thank you, Councillor. I got that through. Our second public comment is from Annette Nixon. Annette. Oh, and David Chappell.
Hi to Marie. Good to be here and to have this opportunity to speak. Thank you. I'm also here to support option 1, and the reason for it is that Palmerston North needs as much green space as it can hold on to and acquire, and it also needs as many community meeting places as it can manage and find and build and share and make available, because community activity is increasingly coming out of the home and out into public spaces. So I think everything should be done to facilitate people being able to get together, to celebrate their events, and to enjoy the company and the well-being that comes from those kinds of activities.
Good morning. Can I just offer a thanks to the council this morning? As I drove into this meeting, I noticed that the contractors were installing yet again the bollards in the middle of College Street by the shopping centre to one of the processes to try and calm the traffic through the village past the shopping centre. I'm not sure how many times they've done it, but I do congratulate on your persistence, and you have the support of most of the community, I'm sure. I think they haven't just been removed accidentally, but hopefully this time they might stay. So thank you for that. As long as I can remember, the idea of a hub in Awapuni has been discussed. And this site is one of those in the future which may contribute to it. And so I certainly support the option one in leaving the situation and working with it as we go forward to the future. So I certainly endorse option one. Thank you.
Last night I was at the Pathways Presbyterian Church Parish Council meeting, and I shared this information with them. They supported option one, and they also reaffirmed their interest in the land that is available at the St Mark's site of Pathways Presbyterian as being available for community facilities, and appreciate also the way that church buildings and space is used by the community, and feel that that would be a very good outcome.
Oh, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, David and Annette. Look, just a quick question. David, you mentioned the idea or the prospect of a community hub. Just for all of the councillors here, can you perhaps just give us a brief explanation of the vision for that?
Well, the centre of the community at the moment is the library, and it is hampered by its space and its location. And so that's one of the features which really would feature as part of a hub, and other facilities as well. It's changed as time has gone on, but as the residential areas develop and there's more intensity probably around the shopping area as time goes on, I think the need for facilities to support the community just grow. And so the site that Annette talks about with the St Mark's Church facing College Street is probably the ideal site. And this site is adjacent to it, so in the long term, something must be done to, with that land can contribute to it.
Yeah, thanks, David. And did that vision actually also include space for government agencies to provide services and support for the community as well?
That certainly has been discussed. I'm not sure of just how that fits in, but certainly as time goes on, the idea of having a community which is sort of more self-contained and where people can walk to and cycle to, and is something which we could be aspired to, but that's something that I'm not really competent to. It sounds a bit far-fetched to me, but it's certainly a dream that some people have.
If I can add to that, Councillor Hancock, in the original gathering of people, which is more than 10 years ago now, that developed the idea of the community hub, I think it's Inspector Brett Calkin was the chairperson at that time, and he certainly supported that idea as being beneficial to the police and I guess to other government agencies.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, David, and appreciate you giving us your comments. All right, councillors, we going to resolve that public comment be received for information, and I thank the Girl Guides as well. And I'm happy to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and we will vote. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. Right, moving through to number 5, which is confirmation of minutes of Council's meeting of the 15th of February 2023, Part 1 Public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any matters arising? There being none, we will vote. It is passed 16 votes for, none against. Right, moving through to the reports section of our agenda. And first up is a paper and report from Stephanie Velvin, our Community Development Manager, around the future of Panako Park Hall. It is page 19 of your papers, councillors. Welcome, Stephanie.
Morena koutou, ko Stephanie Velvin tuku ingoa, Community Development Manager. This report is the second in this decision-making process following the Strategic Options Review, which was presented in August 2022. I'd also like to acknowledge the community members that have attended today. This is a small hall and a small piece of land, but much loved in the Awapuna community. In August, it was requested that we investigate the level of community interest in this property, and the results are presented today for your consideration. The decision today will inform the pathway forward, and there are a few more steps to come in this process as detailed in next steps in the report, including wider community consultation of proceeding with options 1 or 2. I have several colleagues here who are happy to take questions from Parks and Policy, and I'm also happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. This morning we just heard about the Girl Guides and I suppose their wish to continue possibly using some nights. How do you think that would go with possibly a future user of the hall?
Certainly we considered that in our assessment of the groups that expressed interest in the purchase of the property. We didn't have any firm conversations because obviously we don't know who the final purchaser will be at this stage, but I think it could be a possibility given the groups that have expressed interest.
Just a second question before I go to my colleagues. Could council be the purchaser of the property?
Yes, technically. That is included in option 3. That would require additional budget and consideration of the resource required to manage and maintain the property.
All right, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. A few questions on it. What is the earthquake grading on the building? Do we know?
We don't have that information to hand.
We don't. Okay. Did that hold any of the...
Sorry, I'll just interrupt. Our acting infrastructure manager. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bryce Hosking, Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. As it's a wooden structure building and only single storey, it is not deemed to be earthquake prone and doesn't qualify under that legislation.
Cool. Thank you. On page 24, 3.5, of the 3 groups that were interested, are they still interested in taking over the building, or have they totally backed off?
They are interested, yes.
They are definitely interested. Okay, so the likelihood of one of those 3 buying it is quite good, and it will stay in the community?
Yes, based on the information we have.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
That's enough, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steph. We just have, I guess, from my perspective, a small dilemma here in terms of there is pressure, of course, around sort of housing, but there is also pressure in terms of maintaining this in the community. Can you add any more information about the three potential owners of the hall without naming them so that we've got some reassurance?
I can confirm that all of the activities that they're proposing would align strongly with Goal 3 aspirations. So they would be connecting the community and delivering activities out of the hall that would be for the Awapuni community.
And just in terms of sustainability of community benefit, you feel that that is covered in the three applications or the three expressions of interest?
Could you clarify the question?
Yeah, like, yeah, are these organisations or entities, are they likely to remain in the community and provide community benefit over a long time?
Yes, they are well-established groups.
Great, thank you. That's all that I need to know. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. In 6.2, on page 28, it outlines the Rangatane or Manawatu views that they support the property being reclassified for wider community purpose. Would that, am I correct to understand that that would be in line with option 2?
They are supportive of option 1, reclassification for
option
community
1.
use, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Just wondering if you could give us an idea, if we went with option 1, how long the process would take for the reclassification of this land if we went with that option today?
So it would involve a community consultation as the next step. So that would potentially be a month of preparation, a month or so of the actual consultation period, and then time to receive and report back on those findings.
And so I read here on page 30 that even if we went with option 1, a resource consent application from the successful purchaser may still be necessary, which can take 3+ months. In your professional opinion, a 6 to 9 month process, are these three parties still going to be interested at the end of it, or do we risk losing them with a quite long, drawn-out process?
My view is that they would remain interested through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, that led me to another question, Stephanie, that so if, for instance, say, option 1 was the will of council, that would still allow, even though we're reclassifying the purpose of the land, it would still allow these community groups and Girl Guides or whoever to come in and still use the building. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's essentially a broadening of the permitted use
Right.
from what it is currently, so it still includes recreation.
Right, and it would still, we've heard public comment about, a hub and everything else. It would still allow future thinking for perhaps it to be possibly part of that as well.
It would. There would be a 5-year lease with a right of renewal of another 5 years. My view is that the activities proposed by the three groups would actually align nicely with the aspiration of a community hub, but obviously that's yet to be explored.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Stephanie, for the report. I had 2 questions, but one of them has been answered already. My second question would be, or my first question would be, in relation to 5.12 on page 25, you say that in the report that there were no expression of interest received from sports and recreation groups, and that Sports Manawatu engaged with 2 organizations they assessed as suitable. Neither group proceeded with an expression of interest due to the potential investment required to purchase, repair, or maintain the building. Now, my question is, what is the condition of the building at the moment?
The building is in use, so it is able to be used at the moment, but it does require a bit of maintenance. There is a structure on the rear of the property that in particular needs some attention. We've had building assessments completed, and that information was provided through the expression of interest process. So those groups that have expressed interest have done so in full knowledge of the condition of the property.
So technically safe to operate under. Cool, thank you.
Councillor Isabellan.
Thank you. I think the Mayor has touched on most of my questions, but I just wanted to clarify that you said option 3 is the option that allows or provides for council to be the purchaser of the hall. Is there anything to prevent council from purchasing the hall if we do adopt option 1 and proceed with a reclassification or consulting on a reclassification with the view to being the purchaser post reclassification?
I'll hand that one to Bryce.
I'll go to our acting manager, thank you.
Yes, we could in option 1, so they're not mutually exclusive. So council would, however, as Stephanie earlier stated, we don't have any budget currently, so council would have to give some provision to that.
Thank you. And just as well touching on that classification, so the broadening of a reclassification could permit community hub activities or activities that could potentially take place in a community hub in the future?
Yes, without, I guess, having a full definition of what the community hub is, but yes.
In principle.
In principle.
Thank you.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Stephanie. Can you tell me what the square metres of the hall? I couldn't find it in there. Everybody's looking. Well, that's what I'm looking for. You know.
Apologies, we do have that information, we just don't have it to hand currently. It is relatively small.
Okay, could I get that sent to me, please? Yes. Thank you.
Nobody else has it? No. Somebody else have it? Thank you, Aaron. Just grab a microphone.
Mr Mayor, councillors, Aaron Phillips, Activity Manager for Parks. In the previous report, the Strategic Options Report, it notes that the hall comprises approximately 200 square metres in total area, of which there is a 12 by 7.5 metre or 90 square metre hall space with the balance in storage, kitchen, toilets and a separate 70 square metre storage shed at the rear of the property.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was a good summary. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Stephanie. Could you just remind us of the sort of community facilities report that was presented last year? Was there an analysis of what was needed in Awapuni, and how would any decision we make about this hall fit in with that report?
I will call on a colleague, if that's okay, to talk to that report.
Tēnei ngā mihi o te ata te kaikaunihira me te koromatua, Stacey Solomon, Policy Analyst. I was responsible for I had oversight of the Community Places report. The Community Places report broadly supported planning sustainably for community provision, for community facility provision across the city by first establishing a need in the particular areas. In this particular area where Panako Park and Panako Hall is, I believe that the report suggested that there is current provision there in terms of there are buildings, which we understand because we have this hall. The need of that area is potentially higher than in other areas of the city, and that is connected to primarily the mobility of people in that space to, if they wanted to access a facility, to do so in other areas of the city. So the Community Places report is supportive of the community facility in that space.
Thank you for reminding us of that, Stacey. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hapeta.
Thank you, Steph. Just one quick question. What's the valuation of the building?
We've been given a guide price by Girl Guiding New Zealand of what they would like to sell it for.
I can see that 10 to 15,000, but what's the actual valuation of the building?
We haven't had a valuation completed. It's Girl Guide's property.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steph. Probably a couple of questions just for the officers. Parnacle Place being a no-exit street, has the parking team had a look at the effects on the actual street itself with regards to people visiting the property for community activities, i.e. in terms of street volume numbers? And secondly, what's, for the benefit of myself being a new councillor, the interactions that council plays with neighbouring private property owners when it comes to things like maintenance of fencing? Thanks, Bryce.
Yeah, I might be a bit better placed to answer that. In terms of the parking provision, that would be assessed through the consenting process, so that would form as part of that. And sorry, remind me, what was the second half of your question?
Just noting that some of the boundaries are with private property owners, so when it comes time to repairing or replacing fencing, how do we negotiate that with the private property owners, or does it sit with council to cover that cost?
So those being boundary fences would be subject to the Fencing Act. So those there's quite a robust process set out through that act for dealing with those kind of matters.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, that's done the questions. You're released. Thanks, Stephanie. Well done. Right, councillors, we have the options there, and I'm happy to move option 1. I'm reading the room. We'll go with Councillor Johnson this time. So, look, around deciding to retain Pānako Park as a reserve for community use and instruct the Chief Executive to consult the community on a proposal to classify Pānako Park contained in lots 1 and 2 DP 29836 as a local purpose community reserve in accordance with section 24 of the Reserves Act of 1977. So I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Look, just quickly, I think we've heard from the community what they would wish to do with it, and we know there is a need and a want to do things within Awapuni. As somebody that has grown up in that area, I know that place pretty well. I think the best outcome is to reclassify the land. We can then understand what the community groups that wish to be involved in it would like to do. We're in the background as well. If others have been to see the building, I haven't been inside, but from the outside it's a pretty good building for 15,000. And look, we've had so many community groups wanting to have a space. We would be mad not to allow this or facilitate this process to go a little bit further. It links well with the community's aspirations of a hub in the Awapuni or village shopping centre there, and I think this is sort of a stepping stone towards that possible aspiration. So I'm happy to support this and let it go the next step. A few councillors teased out how long that might be, about the parking. Look, all of those things can be sorted through. But I would say it is a small street, but actually people use the facility now. It's got a max of around 50 people that can go in there. The majority of those people come from the Awapuni community. They won't all use cars. They'll come on bike, they'll walk, they'll scooter. So I think we've got to be a little bit open-minded about what this could look like. So I hope you do support option 1. I think it is the best outcome for our community of Awapuni and potential users. Right. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you for moving this, and I agree with your points. And I think I just want to remind some councillors who might be a bit newer around the table that about 10 years ago, Council proposed selling off Panaco Place as part of a bigger package of selling off reserves for development. And community protest was so large that Council backtracked and Panaco Place wasn't sold. Now the option has come around again for us to reconsider, and I thought it was very sensible to go out and try and gauge what community interest was there in retaining that piece of land and the hall for community use. But I think we've very clearly got our answer. There's significant community interest. A number of groups have stepped up to take a serious expression of interest. As well as that, we have our own report now that was presented last year around the need in different parts of the city for community facilities. And as Stacey reminded us, Awapuni is one of those areas that was particularly identified as having a high need for community facilities because of the tendency of the population there not to be as mobile perhaps as in other parts of the city. So I think we've established that there's community interest. Our own reporting tells us that there's a need in the community, and it seems to me very sensible to go with option 1. And I will just say that in my time on council, I've probably lost count of the number of groups that have approached me to say, you know, our group really needs a hall, we need a place, we don't have anywhere, is there anywhere available? So I'm not at all surprised to hear that there was a high level of interest, and I think we'd be very wise to preserve this particular space for community use, given its potentially strategic position going forward for a future hub in that area. So to me, it seems a very logical decision to go for option 1, and I do hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand to support and endorse option 1, and I totally agree with the 2 previous speakers. And I think my rationale for supporting this option is simply because we've heard from the community, and there's also a strong demand for such facilities. We've had many communities, community groups that have come to us over the course of my time here being on the council, who have expressed the interest and desire to have a community hall to conduct their business. And the second thing that I also wanted to highlight is that this will actually enable one or more groups excuse me, to provide services in our community that will foster connections between community members as well by providing them such space. And second of all, this will align strongly with the council's connected community aspirations of maintaining public spaces for community use and for communities to meet and greet and network as well, and which has the potential to deliver good social and cultural well-being outcomes for our community. So it's a no-brainer, and I encourage all the councillors to join us in supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Sabellin.
Thank you. Ngā mihi kia koroa, Annette and David, and also to the Girl Guides for coming and talking to us today. I'd also like to talk in favour of option 1. It seems to me that we could adopt option 1 and still gain the benefits of option 3 by purchasing the hall ourselves for a fairly nominal fee and leasing it to those various groups who've expressed interest while we explore in earnest what Awapuni has been asking for at least 6 years, which is the hall space and the adjacent land at St Mark's Awapuni to be used for a much needed community hub. And I note that we have received $500,000, I am sure, in Better Off funding for the investigation and design of a multicultural hub. Are we looking at this space in Awapuni as a potential match for that? I've been spending quite a bit of time in Awapuni lately, and I've joined the community cuppa at the library there, so we do the quiz and have a good talk with the locals, and with Laura, the librarian, who is doing incredible work. I attend crop swaps at the Wee Community Centre there, and I've also had a walk over of the area by more than one resident. So I've had a really good chance to hear on the ground what people there are wanting to see. And the clear message is they are outgrowing the library, and they are outgrowing, or have outgrown, the community centre. And that's all really good growth, but we want to support that well so that our community can be stronger and better connected. The officer's report did note the possible future development opportunity relating to the adjacent land, and that staff were aware of that existing and growing community aspiration, but picking that up was, I gather, out of scope for the expression of interest process. So if we dispose of that reserve in option 2, we do lose, apart from valuable sponge surfaces, the report talks of the risk of the missed opportunity to realise the benefits of the community use of the hall, but there's also, I think, a missed opportunity to achieve multiple outcomes at once. In our multicultural hub investigations, could we be seeking to deliver a multicultural community hub that's in the heart of Awapuni? Can we ramp up the earthquake and flood protections and use solar passive architectural design, as well as opting for energy resilience instead of on-grid dependency, so that this hub could also act as a critical community civil defence centre in an emergency? We've all seen how important that is to have somewhere where there is still power, where there is still running water, where there is a place for community to go if anything happens to their homes and that's uninhabitable. I'm thinking of a centre that doesn't just serve our community in business as usual times, but that's also critical infrastructure in times when we are facing a crisis. And having that energy and resilience focus also opens us up to different kinds of partnerships and different kinds of funding options, with climate change adaptation and community support funds cropping up all over the place. I feel that if we try to synergise some of these aims, that we have a better chance of pushing that forward a lot closer, a lot faster than if we are just looking at a community hub in isolation. If we adopt option 1 with a view to purchasing, we can still lease that hall to the communities who are expressing interest, and there's a clear need for it. But I feel we should also be viewing bigger dreams for this. What can we achieve that serves our community in normal times, as we're looking for at the moment, but is also going to provide critical protection for our community if any crisis comes our way, as we've seen in the country this year so far. Thank you, ngā mihi.
All right. Look, just I'll write a reply. Thank you for your comments. Awapuni is our largest suburb too. When you think about the size of the community, from Bat Street to Maxwell's Line and everywhere else in between, to the river, to Pioneer Highway. We already have facilities in the wider community, but there's an obvious need for more. The great thing about this is a willing seller, and there's obviously some willing buyers, and we're possibly one of them, but I think that discussion comes later. But there's an obvious community need, and the community wants this, so we'd be foolish not to support and to go with their needs and wants. So please support this, and we will look to vote. Thank you. And it's passed, 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. Right, we move through to the big piece of work today, which is around the annual budget and plan for 23-24. It's consideration of the draft consultation document and supporting information. And I'll invite officers up. Cameron Mackay, our CFO, and I'm unsure who else is coming up. Steve Patterson. So what we're going to do, councillors, we'll go through things to a period today. I've seen some amendments come through on the email, thank you. And we will go through things in steps and break for a morning tea at the appropriate time. So over to you, Cam and Steve.
Kia ora, Mr Mayor and councillors. Thank you for time and hearing around the draft budget. So we've prepared a bit of a presentation for this, and there are some elements which you have seen in the workshop previously, which I'll move through relatively quickly so that we can get to the areas where we would need your input in terms of deciding basically what we bring back to you on the 15th as a draft to go out for consultation. I don't think that's in presentation mode. Hang on.
It's, yeah, we're coming.
Ah, there we go.
Turning it on, Cam? Yeah.
You can tell I'm technologically challenged, right? Okay, so basically what we're really wanting to get through is just a bit of an overview of what we've done to get to this point, but also seek your decisions around confirmation of assumptions and programs, so that we can finalise the consultation material for the 15th. So as we know, we are in year 3 of the long-term plan, and this annual budget takes reference to that, with updated assumptions based on updated information around things like inflation and interest rates. So that has been probably a predominant driver for this budget. As we've discussed, interest rates are rising, inflation's a problem. Whilst inflation is a problem, interest rates will continue to rise. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle, unfortunately. And these graphs are of no surprise to us now, where we're seeing that big uplift in inflation and interest rate increases. Our approach in terms of reviewing the budget, so we started off with LTP year 3 as our starting point, plus previous decisions that have been made in the previous 2 years. We recently presented in the workshop a potential rate increase around 9.5%, but since then we've gone away and looked at, well, what else could we potentially do to further moderate that rates increase and give you some options. And we've also been looking at our capital program in terms of deliverability and what could be delivered. So we've been doing some work on that. Basically, the focus in terms of our operating program, where we've managed to make some further options for you to consider. The primary focus in that space has been on where could we maintain our budgets as they are for this year, where operating programs had suggested a further step increase, rather than just applying the LTP planned increase. So that's been something that we've gone away and looked at since that workshop, and have provided some options for consideration. So it's worthwhile to just remind ourselves what our rates limit that we have set in the financial strategy of the long-term plan is. So that currently sits at 7.6%. Coincidentally, the rates increase that we've got in front of you at the moment for consideration is also at 7.6%. In the long-term plan, year 3 of the long-term plan assumed 8.3% and a rates limit of 7%. So we had actually planned this year to exceed our rates limit in the long-term plan. but in consideration as well of the challenges that we all face with rising costs and interest rates and so on, we've really tried to get towards that area of our rates limit. Well, Steve just pointed out that there is actually a typo on the slide that I'll point out to you. So in the box on the left-hand side, it says that the policy limit for rates increase equals 8%. It's actually 7.6% because that limit changes if we make other changes to our budget because we've got some variable items in there. So that's why that's now come to 7.6%. This is basically just an updated high-level view of what's driving the rates requirement for the upcoming year. As you can see, so interest expense, adjusting our assumption from 3.4% to 4.2% creates us a 2.8% rates requirement, and so that's something that we really have next to no choice but to accept. We also have some other increases that are predominantly driven from the inflationary environment, for example, in other operating expenses and even so far as remuneration. So remuneration is to reflect the fact that that the market does increase from year to year, and that's what we're asking for in this proposal. The other thing worth noting is that we've got a couple of items that are moving more than, say, what the standard inflation is, and we have to adjust for those because they're fixed costs on us. Our insurances continue to increase at a rate much larger than inflation, and if the events that we're experiencing as a country at the moment is anything to go by, it's likely to continue to do so for a wee while. And we've recently locked in a new electricity contract back in September, I think it was, August, September, and so we've had to adjust for that. Questions?
I'm going to do questions at the end.
Okay.
Keep going, Cam.
Cool. Great. Okay, so capital program, this is the updated position that we're at right now. I do have to draw your attention to an item that we put back in error, which was a $2 million further increase to sealed pavement renewals. Now that wasn't actually planned in the 10-year plan, and it wasn't until we did our subsequent review, and unfortunately through this process we had to turn this around really tightly, and we found that actually wasn't an increase that was planned in the 10-year plan. So we've decided that we think it would be prudent to go back to the long-term plan budget. The consequence of actually putting in the additional $2 million sealed pavement renewals as we had in here, we'd assumed that it would still obtain subsidy. Actually, if we put the additional $2 million in, Waka Kotahi won't give us the subsidy on that amount because it's not in that funding block. So we're suggesting to you that shouldn't in fact be in there. We've broken down the capital program into two schedules, capital new in Schedule A and renewals in Schedule B. But what we thought we would do is just highlight to you the top programs in capital new, because there is concerns around deliverability around a $96 million program. based on what we have spent in the past, and we acknowledge that. But I think it is worthwhile that we do also highlight the value of some of the bigger projects in there to you, so that you can see what they are. So as you can see, and two that jump out to mind here are the Transport Choices programs that we've recently approved in the last council meeting. They total close to just over 10 million on their own, and they are externally funded. So when we went away and took 10 million further out of the program, and then that came back in, it put us back where we started. So, but that is money that's coming to us externally. We have the wastewater discharge consent, which is going through Horizons currently, and that funding allows us to progress on that program. And we also have seismic strengthening program that has been planned as part of the long-term plan, and that's broken down at the moment into two things: the crematorium, which you have recently approved, and planned to start the CAB seismic strengthening, which is in the long-term plan currently. Just on this page here, don't want to read out the project specifically, but just to highlight to you that there is the animal shelter, which is under construction currently, and a number of roading initiatives in terms of safety that make up some sizable budget amounts. And in terms of the remaining projects in the top 15, we've got the Better Off funding that's starting to come in, which is fully funded from government. So we're proposing to start that off with 2.5 million there. The focus for that is really on the housing projects initially. So Summer Hayes, the inner city housing investigation and so forth. So that's what we're going to be spending that 2.5 million on come the annual budget. We also had some roads that were damaged in recent storm events, and so to rectify those, a budget is in there of $2 million. So that's something that we need to do to repair those roads. We have in there the Arena 3 upgrade, which is in relation to the roof, which we approved at the last meeting. So there's a number of programs already in that top 15 that are already committed or come with money attached from other sources, such as Waka Kotahi or DIA in terms of the Better Off funding. So we just wanted to highlight to you that there are a number of those in the proposed budget. In terms of the capital renewal program, and we've talked about the sealed pavement renewal correction there, what we're proposing is that we should continue with our renewal program as we had planned in the long-term plan. Our strategy is to ensure that we are investing in our assets that we currently have and replacing them with sufficient intervals. We've had a program in the long-term plan to increase our investment in renewals, and that's an area where we've been relatively successful in spending in recent years. So that's from our point of view, that's an area where we think we would advise that we should continue to invest. Basically what the next couple of slides is to talk about is in response to what makes up MSL. I know there's questions around this, and it has been difficult to sometimes break that down for you. What we've tried to do here is to break it down at a fairly high level, and the reason for that is these obviously spread out amongst all of the activities of council, and to go through them activity by activity at this stage would take us some considerable amount of time. But I think it's worthwhile that we share with you what is actually contained within the types of spending that's contained within the maintained service level budgets, just so that you're aware of what's in there. Obviously, for the big ticket item in there is remuneration. That makes up nearly half of, or just over half of MSL. But if you sort of look at this list, and I think of contracted services, utilities, even administration in terms of software licenses and so forth, they are relatively fixed costs, so they're not really things that once you've committed to them, they're not easy to sort of turn on and off from one year to the next. So the best way to address those is more around ensuring that through the long-term plan process we've set the appropriate levels of service for which then this falls out of. So once those levels of service are in place, it can be quite tricky to unwind some of these, because they're set in place in terms of contracts and other things. Just want to touch on this a little bit around proposed changes to operating program budgets. I mentioned it earlier, but our approach really has been around what could we do to maintain some of our step level increases that were planned in the long-term plan for one more year. As an example, with 3 water reform potentially happening over the next 12-month horizon, could we maintain our budgets at current levels for a year and hold off on some of the things like increased spending and inflow investigations and that sort of thing whilst we wait to see what happens with 3 water reform. So that's a bit of a strategy that we discussed post the workshop, and one that we've taken for your consideration. And I'll have Steve just talk a little bit about what this all means in terms of rates.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, good morning. In terms of the rates, obviously the rates calculation flows out of an assumption about what the total picture is. And so this assumes stuff as it's been circulated at the moment, at the 7.6 total increase, assumes no change really to the structure of the rating system at all in terms of the way in which differentials work, assumes the uniform annual general charge remains at the current level of 200. Of course, the land values, which were the thing that caused us some angst last year in terms of their change, they stay the same this year as they, so there would be no impact in terms of changing values. In broad terms, a 7.6% increase in the total rates will convert to something not too dissimilar from that level of increase for all of the different types of ratepayers and within groups of ratepayers even. So there will be a little bit of difference in percentage terms because of the effect of the flat component, but not much. As you'll see, in terms of the budgets as they stand at the moment, there'll be some reasonably sized increases for some of the particular activities that we fund through targeted rates. And at the moment, as the calculations stand, the figures would be those that are on that particular table. So in terms of the sort of averages, and medians and the like. They're shown in the examples for all of the different types of properties within the documents, but I've just drawn out here the residential ones, and you'll see, of course, we say that the average for residential properties has got a land value of about $468,000. That's the same as what we've considered in the 22-23 year, and the rates for a property like that would increase from 2,973 up to 3,200. Yep, that's basically the rates.
So I'm not going to go too much into the CD at the moment. The consultation document has been circulated as attached with basically the focus and form as it's currently looking. Decisions from today's items will obviously inform some of the content and how that then moves forward. But again, if there's any specifics on that, we can take that back. And this is just a reminder of where we are in the process. At this stage, we're back in line with where we had hoped to be at this stage, which is considering the material for the budget in preparation for adopting a draft on the 15th of March.
All right, thank you, Cam. Thanks, Steve. Number of questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I've got one general question and then some specific questions. So my general question is, since the workshop last week and today, the rates requirement has reduced from 9.6 to 7.6. And in the material you provide, you said there's been a reduction of $2 million in operating programmes. Are all of those reductions itemised in the Schedule C that we've got in front of us, or are there other reductions that we might not have sight of in operating programmes?
They're all in Appendix C.
Okay, thank you. So down to specifics then. So in Schedule A on page 11, there's a proposal to defer the additional social housing units. That's programme 1459. Page 11 of the council separate cover. So it's the first part of Schedule A. So it's programme 1459, additional social housing units, and there's a proposal to defer that to the long-term plan. Can you explain the rationale for that decision, please?
I can probably have a first attempt at that, and if Bryce needs to, he can jump in. But there'll be a balance of deliverability along with the fact that we've added in the Better Off funding component, which is looking at housing as a whole in terms of Summer Haze and inner city housing. So I believe it was around the deliverability of trying to attempt to do both at the same time. But Bryce can add to that if there's anything else he needs to add.
Yeah, not too much to add to that. I guess it was, a decision on balance of looking across the program really, so not just this one in isolation, but looking at everything across the program and I guess assessing the risk of deferral and what would that mean. And that was one that officers, well, I guess myself, made the decision that the risk is potentially lower than others if we deferred it by a year. Could it be delivered if it was put back in? Yes, but as Cam rightfully said, we do have some other housing projects as well.
So while I've got you there, Bryce, sorry, do those other housing projects, have we determined that they will be social housing?
No, so council still need to make that decision and there will be subsequent papers coming to council to get that kind of direction.
Okay, thank you. So continuing on, On page 14, Schedule A, Programme 1888, the Low Carbon Fund, there's a proposal that that be cut entirely this year. I'm wondering how that fits with our strategy of goal 4 around carbon reduction.
Can somebody answer that? David?
Through you, Mr Mayor, David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer. That will obviously slow progress on our climate change goals in relation to Goal 4. As we've talked in the past, a lot of those low-hanging fruit have been picked in terms of the easy wins, particularly in terms of our corporate emissions. So the Low Carbon Fund was there to continue that progress.
So, am I to interpret from that staff don't see a need for the Low Carbon Fund anymore?
No, I think there has been a conversation about the need to reduce the capital program, and in doing that, there's always that difficult task of which items to choose.
Thank you. So moving on then to, on page 17, Programme 1367, Streetlight Infill. Am I correct in thinking that this is part of the 7-year programme to bring streets that had non-compliant street lighting up to spec as a result of the LED introduction?
Good morning, Hamish Freedman, GM Transport and Development. Yes, that is the correct assumption.
So we already have a schedule of which streets were going to be done in which year, don't we?
Correct.
And that's already been advertised, I suppose, in loose terms to our residents.
I don't believe we put the details out to the public just yet.
Okay, all right. And is the reason for that around deliverability, or is there some other reason, or is it around cost saving?
It's not around deliverability. We could do it if we had the funds. However, we considered the risk of deferring it 1 year to be fairly minimal.
Okay. So just moving on then to Schedule B. I guess we can take these two together. I did ask these questions in the workshop, but I'm asking them again so they're on the record. So on page 20 and 21, there's two programmes around renewals for social housing. So one is 1742, social housing grounds, and the other is 1744, social housing hard surface renewals. And so unusually for renewals, they're being suggested to be removed, but there's a comment that the work will be able to be done out of other budgets. So can I just have assurance that if these if Schedule B is agreed to as is, that there will be no reduction to level of service for social housing grounds or hard surface renewals?
I can answer that. Bryce Hosking, GM of Property and Resource Recovery, is probably what I'm using for this response. Yes, we'll be able to, there'll be no reduction in level of service, and for next year, we'll be able to do all the work that was planned through those budgets, through the two budgets that were signalled in the comment.
Thank you. Okay, so on to Schedule C then. There's, on page 29, there's a programme 1987 about community centre maintenance, community centres building maintenance, and it says staff propose to utilise current budgets to carry out maintenance where required. But if we put no money in the budget, how is there a current budget?
So this was one of those gap programs from the LTP that we were slowly staging. So there is maintenance budget within the MSL budgets. This was actually a stepped increase to add to that.
Right, so this was part of additional budget. So there is another
correct
maintenance budget. Right, okay, thank you for that. In terms of 1943, the library management system replacement or upgrade, it says deferred due to timing of ERP replacement programme. Does that mean that that just can't be delivered because of the ERP timing?
Yeah, that's my understanding was the timing of this program was always to coincide after the ERP had been put in place, and because that's going in 1 July, we'd look at that in the subsequent year following.
Okay, just wanted to double check that. And on the same page, programme 1934, page 29, programme 1935, CATS, Public Education and Colonies Management. So that was a cut that was made last year, and staff have continued to keep that budget at zero. I'm interested to hear if we've had requests from the public for assistance with CAT colony management in this time.
Councillors, Kerry Lee Probert, Acting Chief Customer Officer. To answer your question, to my knowledge, no, we haven't.
Okay, so that is the public. What is the public education component of that?
The intent had been to engage an NGO to work with the communities in particular areas around managing cat colonies and better cat management. And as you point out, that was removed from budget last year, so that hasn't occurred.
So do we anticipate there'll be a level of service reduction if we don't have this budget available? That's what I'm trying to establish.
Sure. We continue to provide the cages to the community as and when required.
Okay, thank you. And then the last couple, on page 34, are the two programmes regarding cycle path sweeping and cycle path maintenance. So that's 1994 and 2037. So both of these programmes, it's proposed to effectively half the budget, from my read of it. How do we think that that won't affect level of service for cycle path users?
Just to answer that question, we're still proposing to maintain the budgets at the current budgets that we have, and so it just means that we'd be maintaining the service levels as they currently are, as opposed to a planned step improvement.
So we'd plan to improve them in year 3 of the long-term plan, hadn't we?
Yes.
So, well, what was the rationale for planning to increase the budget then? Has that gone away?
My recollection was it was partly to do with the increased length of stuff and some other work around them, but and it was part of those GAP programs as well, as I recall it.
Yeah, Bryce Hosking, Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. Yeah, it's another one of those GAP programs. So there is already a maintenance budget in MSL for those. This was actually looking to move it towards and make up that shortfall in budget that we'd forecast. Some of which Steve rightfully pointed out, but some of it in general just with things like escalating costs.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've got a talent for picking councillors with long lists of questions. See what we can get through before morning tea. Just interested in the shift from the 9.5 or 6 last week, quite rapidly to 7.6 this week. In terms of, can you give us a general understanding of how impact assessment was done over that short time frame to understand what sort of impacts we might see roll out if we go ahead this path?
I'll have a go at this one. So through the Mayor,
I did say it after the workshop that we would continue to go away and look to see if we could reduce the budgets even further from the proposal that was put to you a week or so ago. Effectively, what you're seeing is probably the decreases in the operating programs mostly. And that's looking at the budgets that we have in place in this current financial year and looking to hold those for the next financial year. I think that that's where you'll see the bulk of these changes that have occurred across the course of that week.
Thanks. I guess through you, Mr. Chair, the question was around the impact analysis that was done alongside that. Could I get a sense of what was done by way of impact analysis?
Yeah, I think the conversations that we had throughout the week was, you know, if we were to maintain our current operating budgets, particularly around those operating programs, what would the impact of those be throughout the course of this next financial year? Had some pretty robust conversations around it. We believe that we can look to get us through to a long-term plan where we can have more robust conversations about you know, future impacts and the like, but felt that we could achieve what we need to through the course of the next year.
Thank you. Questions around the Low Carbon Fund, Program 1, 888. So last week this was in and this week it's out, or proposed to be out. So can I take from that that this is purely a cost-cutting proposal rather than anything to do with value, readiness, or deliverability?
Yes, you can. Certainly, if that capital budget wasn't included, we would still look to, as best as we can with existing budgets, look for programs or projects to reduce carbon emissions.
Thank you. Further to that, in terms of the value of that program, my recollection of the return on investment that was came through the analysis of that most recent cycle was that it was a positive return on investment. Can I just have that clarified from staff?
That's correct. There was a report to the Environmental Sustainability Committee, I think September last year, that confirmed those findings.
Thank you. And from a financial perspective, can I understand the impact on rates of defunding this program?
The impact on rates by defunding this program, given that it's capital new, doesn't have a sizable impact in the year of the program. The impact is more in the debt repayment in years following, so not a sizable impact in terms of rate specific.
So to be clear, if we put it back in, we would still be sitting on 7.6?
Ish. It would have a very minor impact, but I'm not sure whether it would tick us over to 7.7 or 7.8. It'd have a minor impact in terms of its interest component, which is it's going to be about 20,000 for the first year.
Thank you. That might raise a process question. So once we get into the debate, will we be in a position to monitor where we're at today in real time?
Yes.
Thank you. Questions as well around the cycle lanes maintenance and cleaning. Could I get a sense of overall how much we spend on road maintenance?
So overall, road maintenance is around the $7 million mark, and then renewals on top of that added up to about 12, and then capital projects.
Thanks. So I guess thinking about where you could potentially make some cuts, I'm trying to understand kind of how we got from an overall $7 million across the entire roading network through to singling out cycle lanes for a mere $100,000 out of the $7 million.
So as Bryce mentioned earlier, this was an increase to the MSL over the 3-year period, so it was additional on top, with the last year being additional. Our thinking was that we would maintain this level of service that we had the previous year, the previous 2 years, by not increasing it on year 3.
So was there consideration of reducing the 7 million to 6.9 to enable this increase in service that's been long signaled to actually continue?
Not specifically, no.
Thank you. Could we get a little bit of insight in terms of our level of performance in terms of bike lane maintenance and cleaning?
The only performance metrics that we would use is the number of complaints. We get a certain number a year and we try to respond fairly quickly to it. We do have a cyclic cleaning program, sweeping and such.
Thanks. So would that be fair to say that that's a fully kind of reactive footing that we're on in terms of maintenance and cleaning?
Yes.
Thank you. Couple questions yet. Slide 20 had some information about the rates forecast, which I found interesting. It appears to me from that slide that we're asking the lower value properties to contribute proportionally more to the rates base than the higher value properties. Is that a fair assessment?
The level of increase is roughly the same in percentage terms.
So when I looked at the rates bill that a Q1 property would be receiving, it seemed to me that it was a higher proportion of the property value than the rates bill that a C3,
yes, and that's
Q3 property.
Yes, that's true, and that's because of the flat charge regime that we have for water, wastewater, recycling, and the effect of the uniform charge. All of those things are designed in part to make sure that each property pays at least a minimum amount. And
thank you. So that's kind of a decision that a values-based decision, I suppose, that we'd make around this table in terms of what's appropriate in that way?
well, that's been part of the discussion over the years for the council, yes, about those things. But those, the policy for using a targeted rate to fund those particular activities is part of the underlying policy structure that the council's endorsed in the 10-year plan.
Yes, understood. Thank you. Would it be possible to model some different scenarios around the uniform annual general charge in time for us to inform our decision-making in June?
In June, certainly, yes.
Great, thank you. Street infill lighting we've heard a bit about. So that multi-year program, can I just confirm that's being done in kind of priority order?
Yes, we are doing. We have done it in priority order. So the first higher priority is almost completed. Moving down to the lower priority next year if we were to receive funding.
Thanks. So if I were to be walking in my neighborhood streets and feel that I need a head torch, and had yet to see that street name appear on the list of streets in the coming year, I could assume that the streets that are on the list in the coming year are even gloomier than the ones in my neighborhood?
So when the list of streets was put together, there was an assessment done on the gaps that needed filling, and it was prioritised at that time based on the criteria that the officers went through. The list that you've received is not exhaustive. There is another list that would be, I guess, year one of the LTP as well. So this is an ongoing program that doesn't end with next year.
Understood. Thank you for that reply. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I think the question I'd like to understand is just in the consultation document. I think we've done there's some good questions in there, I will say, in terms of how it lands. But have we considered asking more kind of direct questions of the community, like what they would like the rates to be and why?
It's always problematic as to quite how far we go with the questions here. And these ones that are in the document at the moment were, I guess, teasers a little bit in terms of what might be the questions that can be asked. And so any feedback that you have, I guess, can be taken into consideration in developing the document in the end. But the sorts of questions that we think are reasonable for this type of part of the cycle.
Great, thank you. That's me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right, judging by that, I think we will break because there's quite a long list still there, and if we all do our 15, 20 minutes each, we'll be here for a while. So, councillors, we'll break till 10 to, and back into the chamber then. Thank you. Kia ora everyone, welcome back. There's a number of you in the queue for questions, so if I could just ask you, if the question's already been asked, let's just take the answer rather than putting perhaps a different version of it and getting the same answer. And also, if we're asking a question about a specific program or which some of us may be well attuned to, could we just reference maybe the program number and the page it's on, because it will help, because there's lots of you in the queue and I've seen lots of amendments, so we'll go from there. All right? Okay, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I have some questions from the presentation first, and then also some from the papers. Just starting with, I think it's about slide 17, the operating costs outline with the total of MSL, which thank you very much for that. That's been really helpful to have that breakdown provided. So that 104.8 million that's proposed for MSL for the coming year, how does that compare to what's our MSL for this current year?
I might just have to find the right pieces of paper and get that one back to you, but I believe it'll be slightly higher by the inflationary amount as alluded to in the table beforehand, but I'll get the team to give you a...
This year would be higher than 104.
No. Sorry, is your question in relation to the budgeted MSL versus current year?
Current year.
Yeah, so the current year will be slightly lower than the budgeted year by the inflation adjustments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just was interested in an amount, but that's fine. I can come back to that.
I'll come back to you on that one.
And that breakdown, where would staff travel, which category would that come under?
Staff travel, was that the question, sorry?
Yes.
Yep. Staff travel, I believe, would come under the personnel-related type costs around training and professional development.
Okay, thank you. The slide before that, with the breakdown of the 123.9 million, so that 2.7 million impact from capital programs, is that all interest?
No. So some capital programs, so when we budget a capital program, some of them have an operating impact by completing them. So say, for argument's sake, we build a new building, there's cleaning and insurances and other stuff, so we start factoring that in.
Okay, thank you. Going back to a bit earlier to, I think it's about slide 10, where the breakdown is shown of the 7.6%. There's net rating impact of operating programs, and that's that one I would like, are you able to explain what that is if it's not the inflation increases, which is another line?
Okay, so net rating impact of operating programs. So that is what's in schedule, I think it's C. So although they're operating programs predominantly where there are planned increases from the long-term plan. So that's what's driving that 1.2%.
So the increases from what we're doing this year to next year?
Yes.
Are you able to give me any examples of where we're proposing to increase the level of service from what we're currently doing to what's proposed, to the effect of $1.4 million?
As an example, where we've got increases in operating program budget for maintenance, for example, building maintenance, where there's a planned step increase to address the gap identified in the long-term plan. It's not an increase necessarily in level of service, but to actually meet the requirements of maintaining the building, but that was agreed to in the long-term plan. So it's more than just inflationary movement. And there'll be a variety of those sorts of things in Schedule C.
Okay, thank you. Moving back to slide 17, sorry. Going all over the place a little bit here. The capitalised labour, 8.8 million, what is the total for the capitalised labour for the current year?
I'll just check for you, but I think it is roughly around the same as it is in the current year.
So there's not any proposed change to that?
No.
Okay. And is there any risk of that program needing to be operationalised if any of the capital programs that are being worked on aren't progressed?
It would depend upon this. I guess it depends on the size of the reductions and where they are. I know there's a number of capitalised labour that relates to things like renewals and that sort of thing as well. So not all of it is capital new.
Yep.
So it depends where in effect that is, and we'd have to tell you that an assessment of the overall program. So we would then determine, we would need to look at the appropriate capitalised resource in relation to the program that we have in total.
So is there a risk of needing to operationalise any of that if any of the capital programs that have been worked on by that capitalised labour force aren't progressed?
I don't. It's hard to quantify whether there's a risk depending on the size of the reduction and where it is. I probably need to refer to the infrastructure unit to understand exactly.
So when you say size of reduction, what are you talking about?
So if you were to reduce the capital program by a sizable amount, then there becomes a risk. But in terms of as it currently sits, no, I don't think there is a risk as such.
Okay, so my question is more related to any lack of delivery of capital programs. So last year we delivered less than half of the capital program. I'm not sure what we are likely to deliver this year, but if that capitalised labour is attached to the size of the planned capital program, if we only deliver half or a third of it, how do we treat the capitalised labour that is attached to the programs that haven't been delivered in that year?
Okay. Now, my understanding is that in terms of the capitalised labour, in that sense, there's a fair chunk of it in relation to renewals which tends to be completed. So yes, there's always a risk, but I think it's actually relatively small, and because we haven't increased the assumption on capitalised labour in this annual budget, I think we're managing that risk in that way, because we probably are reflecting the size of the program that we're planning for you.
Yep. Thank you. And in your presentation, you talked about there being a bit of a question mark on the deliverability of the $96 million capital program that's in our papers. And obviously, historically, we've seen what's delivered as significantly lower than that. Is anyone able to make any comments on what they believe might be reasonable to be able to be achieved in the coming year in terms of delivering the capital program?
I'd hate to hazard a comment. I'll probably refer to Bryce or Wade for that one.
Yeah, it's through the chair. It's again a very ambitious program. I think that part of the reason for pulling out those top 15 projects was to give you an indication that there are some significant projects in there with big dollar ticket amounts to them. If you were to get those underway, then you're completing well and truly over half of that capital works program immediately. Plus, there's already $30+ million that is already currently committed in some way, shape or form. So I guess that kind of answers the question to some extent, but it is an ambitious program.
Yep, thank you. And just moving to some questions in the papers. Page 59. And just looking at some of the numbers in comparison to the Year 3 LTP budgets, the Central Energy Trust Arena is proposed to have expenses of 8.5 million, and what was budgeted was 6.8, so that's an additional 1.7 million. I'm just wondering if anyone's able to explain the reason for such a big increase in that area.
I don't specifically know the answer right now, but I have a feeling that it's partly to do with depreciation, because the depreciation number is a significant component of each of those assets, and in a rating sense, we deduct the depreciation from that cost before we work out how much that is, as you'll see a bit further below, but you'll see it's increased a lot.
Okay, thank you. And on page 55, comparing once again the expenses to the Year 3 and the LTP numbers, the city marketing and international relations budgets are quite a big step up that are beyond inflation or even the 7.5. They're sort of 9 or 10% increase on what we've got this year for those items, and economic development also, like there's a few $100,000 increase on, so the LTP overall for the expenses was 5.9, but it's proposed to be 6.2. So I'm just wondering, is there perhaps any reason for why that is, that those increases are above sort of what we're seeing overall for the rest of the proposed expenses?
Donna Baker, Acting CE Unit Manager. City marketing is made up primarily of eyesight costs. It's not actually marketing per se. It is historical from when the eyesight and marketing were together. So in fact, most of that is around the eyesight.
So
there's no increase in marketing budgets at all.
So why would the eyesight require, I mean, it's a 10% increase, almost, from 601 this year to 658. What would be the rationale for such a level of increase for the eyesight?
Councillor, we may have to come back to you on that one just to identify the actual detail in that specific program.
Chris Smith, the manager for strategic facilities, is online, and he perhaps might be able to answer that question.
Chris, are you online? Can you answer that? No, he's not. Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions, Councillor?
I think I just have one more, if that's all right. In the consultation document material later on in the papers, I'm looking at page 189, and I've seen a couple of comments where it talks about how we're responding to the challenges that are in front of us, and it talks about, in the bottom of that pink box, it says that current levels of service will remain, but we will not be increasing them this year as was planned in the long-term plan. I guess I've struggled to really understand that comment, given that our expenses exceed the LTP expenses, and I'm just trying to understand, are there actually services that, is that just talking about the capital programs that we might not be proceeding with, or are there actually operational, or are there services that we had proposed to be doing that we're not going to be doing? And if so, what are some examples of those?
Yeah, I might be able to partly answer that. Obviously, that has to be fleshed out further, but what we're referring to there is, and it depends on on the course of this item where we have made some provisional calls to maintain some of our operating programs at current service levels as opposed to current funding, as opposed to the step planned increase that was in the LTP Year 3 as per Schedule C.
So when you say maintain at current funding, what's proposed is well in excess of our current funding or the LTP funding in terms of our expenses. We're up about 2.6 million on that. So I'm not quite sure.
Sorry, specific to the programs where we had some step increases, we're maintaining them within the funding envelope that we've currently got. So there are a number of programs that had some planned step increases, and the proposal as it currently sits brings them back to the current year's funding level.
Have you got it? Has anyone got any examples of that?
Examples that spring to mind currently would be things like the increase in the cycle cleaning and maintenance that's already been asked and answered just before. So that's an area, and there are others in Schedule C.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. Firstly, I know we're way too early to ask for a rollover figure for the end of this financial year, but there's always a rollover figure.
Carry forwards, you meaning?
Carry forwards, yeah, well, and we look at usually several $1 million. So the question I'm going to ask you firstly is, with your proposed annual plan here, do you confidently think you'll complete 100% of it? Because in all the years I've been here, there's always been millions of dollars of rollover. Maybe the CEO would like to answer that question.
So it's through the chair. If we manage to get through a program 85% of any capital works program, I think that we're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
In any financial year. What the team have done is that you will see in the paperwork and that as well, we have looked at what programs might be very well carry forward into the next annual plan.
Yep.
And factored that into this particular program. I'm guessing what you're specifically asking is that what happens if there are other carry forwards before the end of the financial year, and then what does that do to the budget? Yeah, we'll just need to look to how it is that we would need to manage that through the course of the remaining course of this year.
And those carry forwards will also make it harder to complete this budget, won't it?
And if I might just make a comment as well, our normal course of action is we've made assumptions at the moment about levels of carry forward in this budget as it stands. And I think in the capital program there's about $18 or $19 million in the Schedule A of carry forwards that we've assumed, but always in May we review that again and bring back advice to you about that and whether that might have some consequential impacts on what's being suggested as the remainder of the program that would be accomplishable in the 23-24 year. Whether it means if we're carrying forward more than we assume now, that might mean that we'd be suggesting there's some of the programs that you're currently looking to put in the program that might be sensible to cut back on. That's the sort of thing that happens in May each year.
So what effect are we looking at on the rates that you think? Well, I know it's too far out, but what would you give us a pick and a poke, if you like, a figure on what it will do to our rates?
We carry forward more than we've assumed.
Yes.
Normally it doesn't have a huge impact. There'll be, it depends on the scale, but we said, I think, if I remember correctly, that approximately $10 million worth of capital, if we're borrowing that, it has the effect in interest in the first year of about 0.2% increase on the rates. So if we were $10 million more that we were carrying forward, and there could be an increase, an adjustment to the rates of about of that sort of order. 10 million would equate to about 0.2%, not that much significantly.
Okay.
But potentially as well, it would impact on our assumptions about debt repayment, because we, at the moment, assume that there will be debt repayment starting in the second year for the work that's being done in a particular year. So we would revise those assumptions as well.
Through Mr Mayor, just to add to that as well, Councillor, my view is that whatever it is that we've committed to our community that we've said in terms of proposals, that's the number we should be. It shouldn't be any more than that.
Okay. Well, one more question, because the others I had been asked. But first I've got to find out, do we know how many vacancies we have in council at the moment? Is there a figure around that?
Through the Chair, I'm aware of approximately about 90 odd vacancies in the structure at the moment.
Okay. So the question then is that we've a extensive budget there for wages, and if over the last year or two we've always had 90 to 100 people unemployed, or the vacancies there. Do we still need all that money budgeted for wages when we know we're going to have vacancies?
Through the Chair, we are taking care of the staff that we have in the organisation currently at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I've ticked quite a few of my questions off, so hopefully it'll get shorter and shorter as we go. Could I start on page 12 regarding item 2216, Memorial Park Capital New? I know when we visited there was some discussion of building a new fence. Is this 184 grand to build that discussed new fence? Or is it for other works?
Kathy Deaver-Todd, Manager of Parks and Logistics. There is an error in the papers here, councillors. The 184,000 was intended as a carry forward to be pushed into the LTP. The 184 relates to the Heroes Walk, which is in the concept phase at the moment, but it is quite clear that that money will be unsuitable for what we've got in the proposal, and we'd like to bring that back to council in terms of the quantum and the style there. No, this isn't for the fence. The fence would be a renewal, but following the visit with councillors, we're just in the process of getting the existing fence repainted as an alternative. We picked up on that. Thank you.
Awesome. So that's actually zero in terms of our budget?
Correct. We're not requesting that carry forward of 184.
Still on that page, the top item there, 1838, the exotic aviaries. Is that to accommodate our existing birds or to accommodate the acquiring of new birds? Do we know? Is it existing?
So the intention was to accommodate the existing birds. When the consultation was undertaken by the public, there was feedback that exotic birds were highly valued by the public. However, the nature of the displays and the actual birds, and it is something that was still to be worked through. It was just the council made a provision for exotic aviaries. Obviously, the birds have a life cycle, and the collection that we have changes from time to time, but the intention was that it was exotic as opposed to native birds.
So the aviaries would be to accommodate new birds that we would be purchasing in the future, primarily?
Not necessarily, but just be aware, councillors, that the money we're requesting there is only for the design phase. And during the design phase, decisions about the number of collections, the type of collections, and how they present to the community would come back to you during that design phase. This enables us to get a more accurate figure for going into an LTP process.
Thank you. If we turn to page 34, given the extensive discussion councillors have had around trees, I note line item 1858, tree maintenance, is at 108 grand. Is that an increase in budget above what we've got existing, or is that the total budget?
Yes, it's an increase. Another one of those GAP programs.
Okay, so what is our existing tree maintenance budget?
Not sure. We'll have to come back to you on that.
Okay, if we turn to page, just bear with me one moment here, page 43, I just want to confirm for my understanding, under depreciation and amortisation, is that where renewals are funded for, the $43 million there, or are they funded through a different part of this overall?
In terms of funding renewals, some councils say they fund renewals from depreciation, but we don't express it quite that way. We say that we fund it specifically from rates or other sources, and each activity that you would look at, you would see that we've got the total expenditure, we deduct the depreciation from the cost, and then we add a sum that represents the 3-year rolling average of the renewal program. And so that's how we fund it.
So the 30 or so million we have in Schedule B, where's that reflected in here? Is that spread across a whole bunch of different figures, or is it under other expenses, or where does it come from?
Yeah, I'll just find you the page where that, where would we see that?
Sorry, that was page 43.
Yeah, I was just looking to see how renewals are shown, where the best place to show that would be. Might be at the page, the front of these. I think if on page 52 of the papers, you'll find a schedule there that tells you the total capital renewals for each of the activities, and then, so that's adding up to 31 million, and then a page or two over, and you'll see the new capital is adding up to the 67.7 on the following page, and then over on the following page after that, on 54, it shows how those things are funded.
All right, thank you. And my final question was regarding page 44, regarding our prospective statement of cash flows. It has a cash year-end budgeted of 223,000. So is that the cash surplus we're expecting to operate this year?
That's what that statement's reflecting at the moment, yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you. I have some questions relating to stormwater. Firstly, this just from by virtue of being new on the scene, the stepped increase that we've talked about in order to better maintain and look after our existing assets, were stormwater assets included as part of that approach or strategy?
Mike Monaghan, Group Manager, Three Waters. Yeah, the answer is yes, and we've tried to maintain in this proposal those step changes for the stormwater.
Thank you. So just building on that, there are a number of items where the narrative has been the narrative column has been maintaining the level of service as is from the previous year. That sort of looked to me like we're essentially scrapping that the stepped approach in order to stay at the same level of the current years.
Is there a page number I can just refer to?
Oh, yeah, so page 106 is probably the best. That's got the stormwater breakdowns for renewals, capital new and operational.
And as well on Schedule C on page 33, that's showing where those stepped programs were originally, and that's where we're signalling that those original stepped increases are now not being proposed, that we're sticking with the current year's level.
Yes, so I've got that at page 15, page 26 and page 33 across those three schedules there.
Yeah, so we're just trying to follow the programme here. So the step change that we're referring to is that we've moved programmes, or we're suggesting that we remove programmes from renewals in the capital space to capital new programmes because they're improvement programmes.
Yes, so would that decrease in renewals and the increase in new, are they citywide projects, or are they focused into particular projects such as at Whakarongo, for example?
The citywide programmes.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So now, I put in a question to officers at the end of last year about, it might have been this year actually, about vulnerable road data, and the officers noted that it was uncontrolled water flow that's quite often the root of structural damage, and that optimal drainage of well-maintained assets is critical to minimise that sort of damage. What I'm kind of getting at is there was a comment that these budgets can be oversubscribed. So if we don't proceed with a planned increase, or if it's reducing the renewals and increasing the new, do we expose ourselves to any level of risk of unbudgeted repairs for stormwater damage to roads, such as we've recently seen a $2 million spend for 6 compromised roads at the end of last year?
Apologies, just getting the facts straight there. So, based on the information we have now, we're comfortable that we've mitigated that risk as much as we can. I guess the risk probably sits in terms of unknown. So, if we did have a significant storm event or the likes of what we've just seen in Hawke's Bay, well, obviously that has not been budgeted for, and that would require a different conversation again. But so really, I guess it's about dealing with what we know, and in those extreme events, having to work through them if they actually occur.
Right. Yeah. So, so would it be accurate to say that we are reducing our maintenance programs in order to bolster the new infrastructure that we are putting in?
No, we're not reducing the level of maintenance. All that's been proposed so far is just maintaining the current funding from the year we're in currently through into next year, as opposed to looking to step it up.
Right, cool. So we won't be stepping up maintenance, but we will be stepping up new investment, or
Correct.
capital new.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, before I go back, and there's a couple that want to have a second round of questions. I've just got 2, because there has been lots of questions around increases in programs and where are they all coming from. So my 2 questions to you are, obviously there's increases into programs, and to be fair, are we saying the underlying drivers for those are inflation, cost increases over multiple programs, i.e. contractors, consultants, design, whatever it may be, and interest and our increases in interest rates? Are they the main drivers of where we're sitting?
Yes, I think that would be a fair reflection.
Okay, and the second thing that's linked to that, so what you're proposing to us is maintaining the level of service, but we aren't proposing to increase that level of service as the year 3 in LTP in some programs, and that's the balance or the trade-off that we're discussing here now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are still some areas where there are increases that we feel that we should continue to propose to you, but where we can, we're suggesting maintaining at the current level as a trade-off.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've just got one question. It's just around how many people we've got on our council housing waiting list and what the trend has been in those numbers over the last few years.
I'll need to get the most accurate data for you if I can, but generally the waiting list has been around 400 or so, with approximately half of those people being genuinely homeless. and by that I mean couch surfing, having received an eviction notice, living in cars, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Could we get those numbers back, I don't know, by lunchtime maybe? That would be possible? Thank you.
Yeah, the office have said they'll fast track that. Okay. That is the questions done. So thank you, Cam. Thank you, Steve. All right, councillors. This is when the fun starts. So we have the annual budget, the plan, and 2023-24, and this is consideration of a draft of the consultation document and supporting information. And I emphasise that this is a draft of the consultation document. We're not deliberating on what it actually will end up being. And I suggest that we go through the capital new programs first, which is Schedule A. We'll go through those separately as amendments, and then we'll do a catch-all at the end to get a substantive on capital new or Schedule A. Then we'll do Schedule B, which is the renewals. Then we'll do Schedule C, which is the operational programs. And then we've got another couple of motions to pull into place to complete the direction to officers and to get a consultation document all ready for us to sign off at the next meeting and then out to the public. So that's the process, and it's been pretty thorough, and I would just want to say thank you to the officers for the significant amount of work which has gone in a very short time. And although it might seem like a very short period, I know there's been a bit of midnight oil being burnt here. So we appreciate that, and so does our public and residents. So the first one we've got, and this is around an amendment to Schedule A to include program 1888, the low carbon fund of $1,049,000 to the 23-24 annual budget. And that's Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Bowen. So over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. In a climate crisis that does have ever-increasing impacts, our city needs us to stay focused on our strategic direction. If we don't actually get on top of lowering our emissions now, the impacts end up being beyond our capacity to adapt. And we need to sustain these efforts. In fact, in future, we need to be scaling these up rather than making some short-sighted cuts that create increased risks and costs for this and future generations. Myself and no doubt all of us around the table don't really like the fact that carbon emissions are heating the planet, and we don't really like the fact that the hotter it gets, the messier it gets, but that is the reality that we're in, and we need to be doing our part as a council to address that. We owe it to ourselves and the future generations to be responsible leaders and to make sure that we are pursuing that strategic direction. I would feel quite differently about this particular line item if it was one of a portfolio of things we were doing. The fact is, this is our core play as a council at managing down our emissions. And for that reason, we need to keep it funded rather than seeing it defunded. It's a bit curious to me, really. You know, it's one of the few cases where we put in $1 and we get more than that back. So we put in $1 last year and we got $1.40 back. We put in $1 million actually, and we got 1.4 back on the net present value calculation. So this is a fund that does more than pay its own way. Secondly, it's a fund that has almost no rating impact. I think I heard a whisper as I was in my long list of questions that it might be about a $20,000 rates impact in the coming year. So hardly anything in the grand scheme of things from a rates point of view, and makes little sense given that the primary rationale that we're pursuing right now is around minimizing rates impact where we can. Ultimately, this is about going ahead and continuing to do the right things, about making sure that we get our city onto a future-ready footing, and that we do it in quite an agile an innovative way. It's putting the investment opportunity with the staff to work out where they can invest for greatest impact. And again, they've returned us $1.40 for every dollar we put in. So I'd urge you to support this going back in, restore it into the draft budget, and we'll see what the community has to say about the level of ambition that we have in terms of climate action. Thank you.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be brief because this is going to be a long debate, I'd expect, and Councillor Barrett has covered all of the points. So to summarise the points I think he just very eloquently made, this fund makes money, putting this back in doesn't cost us much money, and we've heard clearly from our community that they think we need to be doing more in this space, so people want it, and I'd be surprised if they want to see it come out, but this is the point of a draft. So I'd propose very much that we put this back in and see where it lands. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Mr Mayor, could I ask a question of the proposer?
Yes.
Councillor Barrett, you gave a very good argument as to why climate change is bad, but could you point to some examples of what this fund actually practically does? Because as a new councillor, I know nothing about it.
That's more of a question to officers.
Yeah, to officers who...
Maybe Mr Murphy might be able to answer that quickly.
Through you, Mr Mayor, David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer. So the fund is really there to support, I guess, the continued step change in reducing our corporate climate change emissions. So one of the things we saw was we made a number of gains over the last 4 or 5 years through low-hanging fruit. However, the challenge to continue to reduce our corporate emissions is that we need to think innovatively about the way we're delivering a range of projects. So it's difficult for the officers to predict and I guess anticipate where those opportunities are going to be. So the intent of this fund was also about trying to build our capability and understanding the way in which we can drive down emissions. So a lot of the times when we prepare budgets and programs, we're looking 10, 20, 30 years ahead, and we don't necessarily quite have the detail about the way in which we can reduce those emissions. This budget allows the officers, climate change officers, to work alongside those infrastructure staff who are delivering projects and say, well, actually, we've got this fund. If we add A, B, and C to this project, we've got a fund here, and that will save us money and reduce emissions.
So, David, by way of example, given we can't give examples of what will happen, if we said, let's put solar panels on top of the clock tower, you would say, right, that's of the fund we would access to do that.
That's an example. In the past, we've sort of shied away from solar panel, but I think certainly the economies around that are changing, and that was reported through to, appreciate, prior to the election last year. There was a full review of the Low Carbon Fund presented to the September Environmental Sustainability Committee, and I'm happy to circulate that to all councillors.
So when we say it returns $1.40 for every dollar we put in, could you give some examples of what that is? How we've earned money?
Look, Councillor, I think, I'll be honest, that information is available. The officer's already said he's going to send it out. I think you just have to take the officer's advice that there is a gain there. Is there any other questions? Okay, cool. Look, I'll speak before I go to the next councillor. Look, I'm going to support this because I think we've been approached multiple times throughout the year where we can make some improvements, and this fund gives us some ability to respond. And I'll give you some examples, Councillor. Converting boilers at various facilities around the city, whether it be our aquatic centres through to the Esplanade. Enhancing operating programs to lower emissions. That could be electric equipment. An example is in the square where we have electric mowers now and not very noisy petrol-driven and diesel-driven machines. I mean, EVs, I mean, there's multiple ones, there's other multiple examples. So I'm supporting it because it does give us that ability to respond. And, I mean, look, we just have to look around us to see what's been happening. So I think this is the right thing to do. Councillor Barrett's explained the rating impact on us in the coming year is minimal. Yes, there is a cost, but I think it's spending good money, so I will be supporting it. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just want to speak in support, 2 or 3 quick points. The first one is that I think it's really important when we're getting down into the detailed, line stuff of an annual budget, not to lose sight of our strategic direction as a council. And, one of our key goals is around being an eco-city, and one of the key targets around that is our own carbon reduction. So why we would cut the very programme that enables us to deliver on that goal makes no sense to me in a strategic sense. It follows about 2 weeks after we signed off on the carbon reduction programme in a regional sense, where we're, one of the councils that has made progress and want to be able to demonstrate that progress to our neighbours. And then just finally, I just don't think that this is what our community wants us to do. When you look around and see, how lucky we were compared to some of our neighbours in the recent cyclone, that has brought a focus for members of the public to climate change like nothing we've seen before. And for us then, barely 2 weeks later to cut our one programme that contributes to helping us reduce our carbon emissions, I just don't think the community would want us to do that. So I don't even want to go out and consult on a draft that doesn't include a significant approach to climate change. So I'd urge you to support this being included. Thanks.
Councillor Hapeta.
I'm actually going to go against this, and the reasons are not to do with anything to do politically. It's more about supporting the officers. They've come to us and tried to work really hard to bring the rates down for us and for our community, and worked really hard to do that. And I'm going to respect that position and listen to what the officers have said to us. They've said to us that this fund is actually not needed in this next annual plan. So I'm actually going to listen to what the officers have said to us, and I'm going to support what they've said, and I'm going to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Right, a reply back to you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, colleagues, for questions and for comments. Just one point, I think, to clarify what we heard from officers. What we heard from officers is that if this fund wasn't provided, they would actually be having to go around and poach money out of other budgets. And that's the last thing we want out of this council. We want to make sure that our strategic direction is funded. So I'd encourage you to vote in support of this, and thank those elected members who gave even better reasons than I did for why we should do this. Thank you.
Okay, we will vote. And that has passed 14 votes for and 2 against. We're still grappling with some of the technology, so just bear with us on that. We'll publish a full list of where everybody voted at the end of the meeting as well. Right, the next one, and this again is around Schedule A, and it's to defer Programme 1016, and that is the CAB building work of $4,224,000 to the LTP process. That's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Naylor. I'll kick it off. Look, people, this is some work that's been prioritised, not by us, but by officers. It's work that ultimately needs to be done, but this is a priority decision, and I know there is a tender process that has been started and gone through without our knowledge, but it probably would come to us in a normal work environment for a tender approval. I have a real issue with this building being prioritised over libraries, theatres, other pieces of our city infrastructure, especially when we're seeing buckets and waterfalls in some of our community facilities. This building, which I work in every day, is not in risk of falling down. It doesn't have the leaks that some of our other facilities do. And actually, I just think this is not a good priority decision. we need to do the work in here, and I'm not saying we don't do the work, but actually there's a building just down the road which houses our literature collection for the city and our archives, and it's leaking like a sieve. Now, I know we're going to look at some short-term fixes around the roof and that, but actually this sort of work needs prioritised, and I think we need to be involved in that decision. So I strongly advise you to support this. It has a bit of short-term help for us in the coming year, but we do need to discuss this properly at this table of what the priority list is. And it doesn't sit well with me. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And I think a lot of you do support my views on that. So, look, it is a balanced thing as well, what we're going to be doing. So I think this is one that we can defer for a year to the LTP, but ultimately we've got a big, long list of work to be going through in the coming years. Councillor Arnott.
Sorry. Yeah, I totally support everything the Mayor's already outlined. But in addition to that, I think it's a little bit premature of us to go ahead with this work in the coming year. Particularly, we've got later in our papers consideration of the Civic and Cultural Precinct, and you'll see that the CAB building is one of the buildings that is included in those plans. Some of those pictures have changes to the building. We have not yet decided on the framework or the next steps in terms of how we're going to progress or not some of those ideas. But if there is to be changes to this building, it would be not wise, in my view, to do a whole lot of work now that might then have to be changed down the track. So I agree with the Mayor. I don't think this is a high priority for this coming year, particularly given the size of our capital program is completely, I believe, unreasonable and unrealistic to deliver. I think it's important that we do identify some programs to remove from that so that we are consulting on a more reasonable sized program. I appreciate the work that officers have already done in starting that work to reduce the size of the program, but as elected members, I think we've got a little bit more work today in order to get that down to something that's reasonable and realistic.
Councillor Arnott. Okay. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if I could actually ask a question, please, of officers, just in terms of getting some qualification on this.
Yes.
Could we get a comment, please, just around the deliverability of this program and the time frame, and also any information about cost implications through delay? Thank you.
Yes, Bryce Hosking, Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. So by deferring this work, it would be a reprioritisation or a prioritisation decision as opposed to a deliverability one. We have gone out to tender. We do have a report, I guess, ready to be presented to Council, pending today's discussions. It would probably come to the next Council meeting. We have a contractor who could be on site as early as April this year to begin this work. This work will go over 2.5 years, so this is only part of it. It is going to be streamed over there. I guess the other thing I would mention as well is we will have some sunk costs if this was deferred. We may have a small amount of funds that may need to be, we may need to reimburse the tenderer for should we decide not to. And I guess the other thing I would say is over and above the crematorium, which is underway in this program, so these were the two here, there isn't any funds in there to be doing any further design work either. So essentially by deferring this, the only thing we would be delivering next year is the crematorium if it passed in its current form in front of you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just by way of brief comment, I won't support this. I don't think at this point in time we actually know enough about it. And I have some grave concerns about taking things out of the draft annual budget for consultation, where we actually remove visibility of line items, so therefore our community end up having no say in terms of particular line items, so I won't be supporting. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Another question, I'm afraid, just if I could seek an officer comment about the interaction between this programme 1016 with 902, which has the same comment about CAB seismic strengthening.
So this is actually...
Well, hold on. That's through the chair. Are they all going? Is this all going to be questions? It's meant to be comments. But
And what I'm trying to understand is if we defer that programme, what work goes ahead under 902?
Right.
Because that might help my decision-making about this opportunity.
Apologies, Mr Chair. This is actually the carry forward from this year that's been proposed. So there is money in 902. So essentially this adds to 902. The crematorium needs about $3.3 million next year. And essentially the balance would be used for CAB.
Okay, thank you. I share some of your concerns, Mr Mayor, about the prioritisation of this work. As you said, we're seeing buckets in the library and indoor water features that were never intended inside the Regent. But if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. The prioritisation of work is an operational issue, and we have to do all of this work at some point. The more we push it down the line, the later all of the bits end up being. And I'm concerned that we've got the contract sat ready to sign. This just doesn't feel like the right time to be pulling the pin on this, even though I wish myself the prioritisation was different. So I will not support this resolution at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, it is a question, but it's around the budget implication. So this programme 1016 has got a budget of 4.224 million. But it says that it also includes the crematorium. So if we defer the whole programme, does that mean we're going to be having an effect on the crematorium seismic strengthening?
So there's $3.3 million in 902 for next year. That, if this was deferred, this carry forward, that entire budget would be used on the crematorium, nothing else. So this, essentially, we would not do any further work at all on the CAB or any other building currently.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just want to ask a question just to...
Well, I'd be silly not to allow you, but...
just to help with my decision-making. I've sort of heard some of the questions that have been asked before, because those were sort of the questions that I had around the implications of delaying or deferring this work. But in relation to the civic and cultural precinct work also happening, what are the sort of correlation or the implications, let's say, of deferring it? And given the fact that we're also considering this, the civic and cultural precinct master plan today, what sort of implication would that have on the design and everything that has to do with the civic and cultural precinct master plan?
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, can I just interrupt before the officer and just say, Councillor, we can't hear you if you don't speak into your microphone.
Sorry. My question was largely around the civic and cultural master precinct master plan.
Just speak into your microphone. He knows you're there.
Eye contact is very important, Mr Chair. Oh, no. So, if we were to defer this piece of work, or what sort of implication would that have on the work that we are currently considering for the civic and cultural precinct master plan? What sort of implications, or in terms of the correlation?
So, well, essentially very minimal implications, because even in the various iterations of the design for the master plan, the CAB is the CAB and it's staying where it is, so this seismic work would have to be done. Probably there would be a wider implication or consideration to the library and Te Manawa, which are a part of that civic cultural precinct, as opposed to the CAB. So if you deferred this, essentially you'd just be deferring seismic strengthening into the LTP. It wouldn't necessarily affect your decision later on today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Look, just as a right of reply, and look, I've heard some of the questions to the officers. This is about priority, and I actually will push back on this shouldn't be our responsibility. Absolutely it should be. We should prioritise whether the library goes ahead first or the CAB goes ahead first or some other building goes ahead first. It will affect the delivery of other projects. In fact, some of the answers told you that the crematorium will get finished, boom, straight away. It's really just getting some more oversight on this. As the Mayor and you as elected members don't have a clue what is being done. And again, you all said, in fact, I think it was Councillor Hancock, said he didn't really know didn't have enough information about it. So I'm saying to you, we are just delaying this work, giving ourselves, we won't deliver the capital program, and that's another discussion to come. I do strongly advise you that, we need to actually delay this. It's going to get done at some stage, but I think it's very foolish just to plough ahead with not the right information, lack of understanding of where the other cultural facilities are going to get improved, and even just basic maintenance. So I would advise you, please support this. All we're doing is delaying it, getting some more oversight from the officers on what they're actually doing and actually having a say in the priority. And I think that's one of our fundamental rights as an elected member. So I strongly advise you to support it. Thank you. We will vote. And it is passed, 11 votes for and 5 against. Right, we'll move to the next one. Well,
it's not showing.
Sorry, we've got some problems with showing all the votes. We only show some of them. And it is capturing everything, but we will get, in fact, I'll ask the officers if they can do something at the lunch break so you get an idea, because there will be interest about that. Okay, we'll move now to the next one, which is Schedule A, the river work. And this is Councillor Naylor around deferring program 1844, the Manawatu River program of 200,000 to the LTP process. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just as an introduction, there are a number of programs that we will be discussing today, and some of us will be proposing to defer those for consideration during the long-term plan process. And I just want to point out that at no time am I going to suggest that any of these programs are not worthwhile programs to deliver at some stage in the future and will provide some benefit to our community. My purpose in proposing that they're deferred is simply to be able to reduce the planned capital program to something that is more deliverable. I think there's more integrity to our community to put out a plan that we can hand on heart say, yes, we can deliver this plan. The Chief Executive has already said that it's a highly ambitious capital program. I think everything that we've heard in recent years points us to the fact that $100 million or close to, well, where are we up to now? 97.7 million plus whatever is carried forward, which will put us well over 100 million, is not a reasonable or realistic capital program to plan for in the coming year. So if you want to just, for your reference, look at page 14, there are 4 programs outlined there under the Manawatu River section. This is one of those programs, and certainly I've seen the investment in the river programs in recent years, and I really like the work that's being done. There's been actually a significant amount of improvements and changes that I enjoy and many of our community enjoy. I presume that deferring this will mean that some of the additional programs we'll have to wait a bit longer for, but I'm comfortable with that proposing this as one of the programs to defer.
Thank you, councillor. Look, I've seconded. I will support it, and again for the reasons that councillor Naylor alluded to. It's not chopping it; it's deferring it, and I just want to make that emphasis. It's a massive program to deliver, and we know now, we absolutely do know now that we're not going to be able to deliver this. If we get to 3/4, I think that will be deemed a success. There's plenty of other programs on the river that are continued, and in an operational sense, I wouldn't be touching operational programs in this space. This is new, so it's small, but it does add up. Councillor Harpiter.
Sorry, Your Worship, can I ask a question to the officers?
Yes.
An implication, Kathy, of what this will, the effect this will have?
Councillors, the projects that are proposed in this program are part of the Manawatu River framework. So they're all projects that have been identified by the community that are of importance to them. We have already, as officers, reduced this down to a minimal level, and that's at 200,000 from that program. This would impact on things like the jumps, the gym platforms, signage, additional bins, some of the things that are coming through in the queries and the requests from the community for additional small features within the river park as it's the use is increasing.
Thanks.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll be pleased to know I'm prepared to comment without a question. Look, I'm just not in a position to support this for the simple fact officers have already given us more than $500,000 of savings in this space, and now we're proposing to kick the last $200,000 out from under them in what is a treasure of our city. When we talk about why people live here, why people visit here, and where people go for recreation, it is the river, and we need to keep improving that. There's good work in the pipeline, and I would urge you to ensure that we continue to fund this at the very modest level now of $200,000 rather than the $750,000, which was in the original budget. So please do not support this and ensure that we keep making sure that the treasures in our city are well invested in.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I see that there are 11 of these proposed deferrals with Councillor Naylor's name on them somewhere. And I'm just going to make one comment now for all, really, which is that I don't support additional deferrals. I think staff have been through the budget multiple times and given us their best option. And when I look at the list that has been emailed to me, it's all things that community have asked for. City Centre Play came to us through a submission. Additional car parks at Bill Brown Park, that's the Pacifica community requesting those. Artificial football field as a partnership with Central Football. Memorial Park Sensory Garden, it's a contribution to that park accessibility. So I'm not going to support any of these. I would much rather that we went out with these in the draft and that the community had a chance to identify any potential deferrals that they were interested in. And I'd be happy to revisit it when it comes to the sort of post-submission decisions. But at this stage, I would like to keep all of these in. So to save time, this is my comment for the next 11 items. Thank you.
It's appreciated. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, o tira tēnā tātou. I'm going to oppose this because I believe that for the very reasons that Councillor Johnson had mentioned, but also for the fact that I want to state here that our rivers are taonga, and We just have to keep that at the centre. We are a river city, we are a river people. It's popular. We have the statistics. We see how many people walk up and down the awa, how many people are using it. Te Ara Kotahi, the bridge, we have that on the side. You can see how many people are crossing over it and using it. To pare back any more would be detrimental, I believe, and short-sighted. And I would like to say, refer to something that we say in Te Ao Māori, mā wai hei te aki, a Papatūānuku. Who will look after Papatūānuku? Who will look after the river? And the reply is, ko tātou, all of us. Kia ora.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to take a leaf out of Councillor Johnston's book and do the same thing for the following 11 items, but on the opposing side. These programs will be deferred by undeliverability. They will be. We achieved less than half of our capital program last year, and so we can stand here today and tell our community we are going to do all of these things and let down our community on every single one of them with the undeliverability. So I agree completely. I would love us to have new signage down at the river. I would love all of these things to happen. If I had the money to do it, I would vote in favour of keeping every single one of these. In fact, I'd up our capital budget by another 50 million. Every single thing we do in our capital new is things for our community. Every single item in there. And so to cut a single one of them is going to cut something that somebody in the community wants. But that is what we are here to do. That is our job. And to go out to the community and say, right, well, here's a $100 million capital program. Take your pick as to what might or might not happen. I don't feel as honest. I would rather tell our community what we are going to do and then be measured on our ability to achieve that, rather, and be upfront and clear with our community. That is what this is doing. This is saying these are the programs that we genuinely are not going to be able to deliver. Now, of course, if you take any item in isolation, it's deliverable. If the council put all of our resources into delivering $200,000 down the river, we would do it. And so, of course, the comment from officers on any particular item is going to be, it is deliverable, otherwise it wouldn't be in here. But the reality is, what we know is that they are not all deliverable, otherwise it would have already all been delivered in the last term, or in the last year. So these 11 items equate to $2.688 million out of our capital new spending. And one of the things that I am not prepared to do is saddle up our future ratepayers with significant interest repayments on debt over the coming 3 years. We're already facing an over 3% rates increase driven purely by interest rate increases. And so to say, oh, well, it doesn't have a huge impact this year, well, this year we are facing the huge impact of all of the programs that we've put forward in the past. And so next year, we will be facing the huge impact of all the programs we put forward this year, and every year goes on and on. Because, as our officers have said, we can't simply not pay the interest on our debt. So this is a real cost, this is real money, this is real. It's not just something that we'll worry about in 5 years' time, we're worrying about it today. So I recognise the compassion of our councillors for wanting to do this, and I have that same compassion, but I'm not prepared to go out with a budget that we can't deliver. And of course there's always going to be some we can't, but I would rather we're honest with our community than it just gets deferred by undeliverability and they see us as effectively lying to them. Yes, we promise we'll do this, and it doesn't happen. So I think it's not nice, it's not fun, but it's better we're honest than unreasonably aspirational.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll do the same as the last two speakers then. I will get up in the same a bit now and vote the same way. Any way we can possibly lower our rates take to our community, I will support. For the simple reason, if any of you would like to come and sit with me at the Grey Power office on a Monday morning and hear how some of the people, the older people, are actually suffering because of the rates in this town. Had a lady on Monday, and she was complaining because $130 a fortnight of her super goes to rates. $130 a fortnight she pays to the rates in this city. And we want to increase it. She can't afford it. And we laugh about a loaf of bread sometimes. Well, to her, a loaf of bread's quite a lot. So any way I can take a little bit of the rate take out, I will support it. Because the people in our city with the rate inflation and everything else cannot afford it, especially those on fixed incomes. So I will support any way I can to lower the rates. And that will go for all the next ones as well.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking to this programme, no other programmes. I may well talk about all of them as they come up, just warning you all now. I'm not going to support this, and the reason I'm not going to support it is because I don't believe this is deferred by undeliverability. I think what the officer has said is that this programme has been reduced from $750,000 to $200,000 based on contractual commitments and a very small minor works programme. What that says to me is that the officers have done the thinking about what is deliverable, and they've said that 500,000 odd of it probably isn't, but 200 is. And I'm prepared to back their consideration of that here, and I won't be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm not going to support this, and I'll make some general comments. I'm actually quite disturbed by the process that we've currently found ourselves in. We actually got an email this morning from Councillor Naylor suggesting a whole lot of things that we're to consider for taking out of the annual budget. And when we had the first few items come up, we can expect that Councillor is going to ask some questions about that, because we really need to have some understanding of what it is that we're actually taking out of the annual budget, which of course has already been consulted through the long-term plan. So these are things, as Councillor Johnson has said, are actually included into the annual budget because the community has asked for them. So we need to be very clear that every time we take something out of the budget, or the proposed budget, that reduces visibility to the community in terms of what it is that they can come and talk to us about. So therefore, what happens is that reduces the opportunities and the voice of the community in terms of what it is that they want in the budget or what they want out, because we make them unconsulted cuts. And that is wrong. It's counter to the principles of democracy. We have got to this point through the very, very good work of council officers. They have worked very hard to reduce a 9.5 down to the current 7.6. Our community deserves for us to actually take the current draft budget out to the community for them in terms of consultation. It's their voice that's important, not ours. So we need to listen through that consultation process. We also need to show some leadership as councillors. We need to be a city of ambition, not a city that is too afraid to take some risk, calculated risk to improve the lives of our community. So please, let's not go through all of these things one by one and try and carve out things that the community actually wanted in the budget in the first place. So please, let's reject this and all the other ones. Thank you.
Right, a reply back to you, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Appreciate hearing the comments, and there are a few things I'd like to respond to. Absolutely, our awa is our taonga, and we need to look after it. I think it's really important for all elected members to understand that the program that I'm proposing is deferred for consideration next year is not our maintenance and is not our operational investment into our awa. Those investments remain in our annual budget. For example, on page 59, we can look at our city reserves under our expenses and see that we're investing 6.3 million into that, which is actually 2 million more than our year 3 LTP budgeted amount. So we are absolutely looking after our taonga in terms of our operational and maintenance investment. Capital new is new stuff that we haven't got already. And it's really important to understand that when we support capital new, that it's not just the money that we're spending that year, but with any capital new comes an additional operational and additional maintenance for follow-on years. And I just think it's a really important point for elected members to understand when we are considering capital new programs. I 100% support us being completely transparent with our community, and the point that Councillor Hancock raised is one that I am mindful of, and I think as has been outlined in previous years, any programs that are deferred as a result of an agreement by us today, I would propose that those programs are outlined in our plan as programs considered but not included. So it's really clear to our community the decisions that we've made today, and they can certainly comment on the programs that have been included, and they can comment on the programs that haven't been included. Both of those sets of programs can be very easily identifiable in our consultation material. The third point to Councillor Bowen's comment about deliverability. When I talk about deliverability, I'm not always talking about at an individual program level. I'm talking about the deliverability of an over $100 million capital new program. So it's the overall workload that these recommendations are trying to address. We've heard that it's very ambitious. We know from historical evidence that it's not realistic and it's not deliverable. We delivered 47.9 million capital program last year, and 21.3 of that was capital new. So even if we reduce $7 million worth of capital new programs and get it down to 60 million, that would still be almost 3 times what we did last year, and well more than the $39.9 million top capital new delivery in any year in recent times. So what I'm suggesting in terms of deliverability is looking at that bigger picture. The other thing that's really important to note is that some of this, I understand, is actually about design work. So, yeah, perhaps that's a comment for some of the other programs, but perhaps I'll leave it at that.
Okay, councillors, we'll vote, please. Just check you voted, please. Yeah. Okay. That's failed. 7 votes for, 9 against.
Mr Mayor, can I suggest that we take the remaining items together to save time?
We'll take a lunch break and maybe decide on that. We could possibly take a groupings of them.
Okay.
Because
just
they fall into different categories, but actually the vote is close, so I don't want to prejudge anything as well. We might just take the next one and we'll break it past. So the next one is again around the river. And this is Councillor Naylor around deferring program Marae Tarata of 108,000 to the LTP process. Councillor.
Thank you. This program is outlined on page 14 under the Manawatu River, similar to the last one, but actually it's a little bit different in terms of the fact that the comment there is for development planning. So it doesn't appear to be the delivery of the program, more the development or the preparation for that. My reason for identifying this one is that the Te Motuapotua development plan implementation, which is also in that group. There is some money in there for design and consenting, and my view is that that is probably the higher priority to deliver on in the coming year. I think the quantity of programs that are under design and under development is probably a little bit more than what we're actually going to be able to deliver on in coming years, given the size of our overall program. So I did really want to look at targeting some of those that are still under development to sort of stagger that work. So that's my reason for identifying this one.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, just a question, please, for the mover. Can Councillor Naylor advise what consultation has taken place in terms with Mana Whenua in terms of this proposed cut?
I asked that question of officers in my list of questions that I sent out on Sunday night, and officers' response was that they haven't had those specific conversations. My view is that I would like to hear from iwi in terms of any of the decisions that we make in programs that we include and not include, as to what their priorities would be. Oh, I'm just answering a question.
Mr Mayor, I'll oppose this. Again, it shows a lack of forethought in terms of consultation. I guess this directly impacts on Mana Whenua in terms of this is a program which will benefit local iwi. So for those reasons, taking it out at this point in time is it's pretty poor. Thank you.
I'll do the right to reply. Fine. Okay, we will vote. Take it out. And that is failed, 6 votes for and 9 against. All right, councillors, we'll break here now and we'll come back at 1:30. I've given you extra 10 minutes. And we'll have a bit of a discussion and decision whether we take these in groupings, because I'm getting a bit of a feel for the room, so on things, and we've got a lot to go through. Okay, we'll see you at 1:30. Thank you.